All right, it is 6:30 p.m., Monday, December 15th, and I'm calling this school board work session to order. As we call this meeting to order, the school board would like to take this moment to respectfully acknowledge that we are residing on the traditional land of the Dene people. Our mission statement: as a community, we create supportive learning environments where all students thrive. Ms. Richardson, will you please call the roll?
Miss Carol Hubbard,
Here.
Mr. Doran,
Here.
Miss Julian,
Here.
Miss Hewitt,
Here.
Mrs. Hull,
Here.
Miss Maple, Mr. Burgess.
Here.
Here.
Thank you. The board has a quorum.
All right, on our agenda tonight is policy work for Article 5. I'll turn this over to Ms. Dillard here in a moment. But before we jump into it, I did want to remind everybody that we will not have a whole lot of opportunities second semester to be diving into policy work because of budget and other things that are going on. So please try to be as efficient as possible with time so we can get through as much as this as possible before we adjourn at 8:30 p.m. And with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Dillard.
Thank you, President Burgess. Just pulling up the policy on the screen here, the policy manual. So we have Article 5 we're looking at today. Sorry, just give me 1 second. Okay, thank you for that. So this is, you saw half of this article before our last work session. So this article is going to have policies that we already discussed and you looked at the first time, but then I just added all of the rest of the policies to this packet. So this is all of Article 5. We're going to start with Board Policy 5111, which is on page 10. And this was a policy that we had held out and we're still developing. So it wasn't numerically, it was towards the beginning, but it wasn't in the first discussion for work session. There were some statute language changes because of the AK Reads Act that added some language about 4-year-olds. And so we just wanted to make sure we had good legal guidance on what that meant for us procedurally. So we are happy with this draft policy for admissions. 5111 admissions. This pulls in 3 of our policies, 1021, 1021.3 through 1021.3, and then 1022, which is more about grade placement, and that content is going to be content for administrative regulation.
Mr. Doran?
Thank you. Question through the chair to the administration, just so my understanding. In terms of when we talk about school age that are 6 through 20, statute for compulsory school age is 7 to the upper limits. So I'm confused about why we're using 6, because I believe what the statute says, and again, there might have been a change that I missed, but when I did a quick review, I think it's the same, that your compulsory is at 7. If you start school at first grade at 6, then you have to continue. You're considered, you're supposed to continue once you start school. And 5 is for kindergarten, 6 is for first grade, and 7 is compulsory. So my question is, why are we settling on 6 to describe school age?
Thank you for that question. So there are different statutes that speak to those 2 different things. So school age is the 6 to the 20. That's when schools are essentially allowed to or expected to take in students for K-12 education. And then compulsory education is 7 through 16. So it's 2 separate statutes.
Okay, and why do we start at 6 instead of 5?
5 is actually considered early entrance to school because that school age is 6. So 5 is a decision that the district has made to be entrance to kindergarten,
Okay,
and most districts
so
do.
the state statute defines school age as 6 through 20.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Doran.
I have another question on this. When we talk about the K-12 admissions, the under school age, 2 seems to be covered under 1 because whether it's a military family, if they've started and, in a district, in a program, an official program, and kindergarten, we continue them even if they may have started at 4. And I know some states do allow rolling entry, or if you're going to turn 5 in a certain period of time, you can start the year and stuff. So this is an important piece. But I'm trying to figure out, and especially when it talks about pre-kindergarten, what do we mean? And also pre-kindergarten, we still have the age under state statute, which references 5 for kindergarten. My understanding is they're either in kindergarten or they're not. If they're pre-kindergarten, they're not in kindergarten, so that's not a player. So I'm confused on that section.
So it is, this is the reason why this was held back, and we discussed it a lot with legal, because the statute change actually took the 5-year-old language out and just said 4-year-old, just says 4-year-old now. And that was to open up the potential for early entrance and to support more increasing pre-kindergarten programming. So when you look at this bulleted list, number 1 is straight from the admissions statute. Number 2 is from the military compact, and I would say that there are slight differences. And both of these, by the way, carried over from our previous policy, so there's no changes there. The first one is saying that if you're in a kindergarten, regardless of if you're 4 years old, essentially, if you're in a kindergarten in another district, you could come into our kindergarten. The second one is saying that if you successfully completed a pre-K program, that you could enter a kindergarten. So, I mean, they're close, but I see some slight differences there.
Follow up. So is there a clarification on what a pre-K program is? I mean, it's not just a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, it's going,
And that's where, at the top where it says any 4-year-old child. So there's still that 4-year-old expectation. They still have to at least be 4 years of age. But our district allows 5-year-olds to enter kindergarten. If you're 4, then potentially under these different scenarios, you might be allowed in, but not a 2 or 3-year-old.
okay, all right. Okay, thank you. I still have little concerns, but it is what it is, sounds like.
Ms. Carol Hubbard.
Thank you. I'm curious, is there any kind of testing that could be done in lieu of these requirements? I mean, I started school when I was 4 and I didn't turn 5 until Christmas. I had never been to a pre-K program. My son started school at 4. He had never been to a pre-K program, but we both read by the time we were in school. So, I mean, I don't understand, like, are there other options?
I'll start off and then I'll hand it over to Ms. LaPlante and Ms. Dillard, who have had most of the conversations around this. And so, yes, technically there could be other options that the district could explore in terms of testing early entrance for students. I think the capacity for our district to do that at this time is limited. I feel like if you crack that door open for 4-year-olds, that you could have a bunch of families that now want childcare essentially for the public schools to take them into kindergarten. And we certainly don't have the capacity to test every 4-year-old to see if they would meet the criteria for early entrance for kindergarten. And so that's where our concern would be there, and feel like, uh, this policy is in line with what our past policy has been, and aligns with many other districts within the state.
Okay.
Mr. Doran.
I just want to speak because I think it does come up in one of the other policies. I'm just finding it right offhand. But to Dr. Minor's point, I think it's well taken. And having been in the district when we used to go through a whole process for early entrance, and the complications that were created in the board at that time, then ended that practice, and it's been almost 30 years since they did that. But I remember the number of hearings and issues with that. So, I mean, whether a 3 or 4-year-old should be given early entry. So, and I think that I saw that addressed in another area, but I just in support of the way we are approaching it.
Thank you, Mr. Historian. Are we ready to move on? Any other questions or comments from the board on this policy? Ms. Hewitt.
So the way that I read the statutes that were referenced in this sections, it says just that the governing body of the school district, if the child meets the minimum standards prescribed by the board, evidencing that the child has mental, physical, and emotional capacity to perform satisfactory for the educational program being offered, kindergarten. So I think to Ms. Hubbard's point, that those are made locally at the school, those discretionary decisions.
Correct. So, well, essentially, the district has determined that a 5-year-old, that the parameter for them coming in, if they turn 5 by September, meets those parameters. The district could certainly put in some sort of additional testing or some sort of evaluation to bring in younger students. That's covered under the statute, but that's not what the district has decided to do. So there's no specific testing that kindergartners need to go through to enter school at that age, at the 5 years of age, because the district has determined that that is the timeline that's appropriate for those students to be prepared to come into kindergarten.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other comments from the board, so I think we're ready to move on.
So we're going to jump ahead because we've looked at these other policies to board policy 5112.6, which is on page 17 and addresses education of children experiencing homelessness. This is a policy that we did already have. Alaska Association of School Boards had lumped into this policy also foster care youth. We don't have a policy on foster care youth. We chose to separate those two things so that directly after this, we'll see the next policy, which addresses foster care youth. But for this policy, it's pretty straightforward. It's all covered by law and regulations. And we have a robust administrative regulation already that guides decision-making and eligibility for children experiencing homelessness, and that will carry over to this policy.
Questions or comments from the board? Not seeing any. I think we're ready to move on to the next one. Thank you, board.
And so then the next one is education for children in foster care, and this is brand new language and policy to our district, but nothing new in our practices.
All right, seems like this one is good as well. Not seeing any hands.
Okay. The next one is attendance, and let me just look at my notes. Yes, this is attendance. It aligns with our board policy 1031 and 1031.1. This also has a very robust administrative regulation that we're working on and have been working on from the beginning as we worked through this policy, and will be carried over to this policy. And there we see that compulsory education definition.
The only thing I have here is maybe under that compulsory education bit, if we can add language that clarifies that it's state statute that legally requires that and not our policies. Ms. Julian.
Thank you. I appreciate this attendance policy, and I was just going to ask from a broader perspective: are there policies out there that school districts have passed around attendance that have helped address chronic absenteeism? Do we feel like this policy supports the activities that our principals and our school administrators are looking for when they are looking for an attendance policy that can help them encourage attendance at their schools?
I think it's a good question. I don't know that I've seen board policy that has made a huge difference and shifts in attendance at local school district levels, but certainly different interventions that districts or schools have implemented have moved the needle in attendance. A lot of the experts on attendance improvement lean on carrots rather than sticks. 30 years ago, I think there were a lot of attendance policies that had more punitive measures for families and students, and that's shown not to be productive in terms of improving attendance. So really focusing on the supports available for students and families and incentivizing attendance is kind of where the growth is seen, but not necessarily always tied into board policy itself.
Mr. Dorn.
This is the section I was also thinking where when you start school, you're considered to stay in school. And so I wanted to just say thank you for including that last line in the under compulsory education, which was, I think, a very wise move by our legislature a long time ago when they did address those issues. And so you've captured that. So thank you.
Okay, anything else from the board on board policy 5113 attendance? All right, I'm not seeing anything. Let's keep moving.
All right, the next one is 5116, school attendance boundaries. This aligns with our board policies 1032 through 1032.2. No changes in procedures here with this policy language.
Mr. Doran.
Okay, my question on this is that sentence, last sentence in the first paragraph: the district will not provide transportation to schools outside of a student's attendance area. Unless I'm missing someplace else, is that sometimes we do. I mean, aside from special ed, or where we're running shuttle buses to a magnet school and thinking, as we have, or we may, if we really had the money, we might want to provide more transportation where we have at times had the capacity to do it to some charter schools. We were able to do some shuttles, that type of thing. So I'm just concerned about the absolute will not versus it will not necessarily provide, leaving it open, the flexibility. And I'd go to administration to how you might want to word that, but this is an absolute will not, but there are times where we have and we want policy maybe to, if it's within our means to do it, that we would like to provide that service.
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and I guess I'd have to do some historical digging on if this policy was in place when we did do some of that more broad transportation of students. I don't know that we need policy to support shuttle buses because essentially our transportation takes the students to their home attendance area school, and then we transport students for a variety of reasons during the school day, whether it be field trips or going to other classes. But I hear what you're saying in terms of if we wanted to broaden support for our schools of choice, would this policy prohibit us from doing that? And so that's something that we can take back and consider and see if there's more flexible language that we could add into this policy for either a next work session or first reading.
Okay. And just a quick follow-up, and I'm not wedded to the idea that this needs to change. If it does give us that latitude, I'm comfortable with that. I think we can come up with a reading that and an understanding that's there. But I just wanted to make sure it would not preclude us from doing so if that was appropriate and within our means.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Ms. Maple.
I appreciate this clarification in the school attendance boundaries within our policy because I feel like the statute that references this, I think it was the statute that's been brought up repeatedly within conversations about charter schools, that there's this perception that we are required to be providing some transportation, and that then gets presented back as if we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. And I think that this gives us clear language to lean on, that we are following our policy by with the options that we do provide, we are following our policy. Because I haven't felt like that was I haven't felt like I could respond to those questions and participate in those conversations and be able to lean specifically on policy that supports what we are doing. And this gives me that.
Ms. Dillard.
And I'll just add that we do have a charter school transportation policy, and I think we'll also see somewhere soon, maybe tonight, that there's similar language regarding part-time enrollment, maybe to where you can get on a bus where the route exists. And I think this is much more specific to you live in the U Park area and you really want your student to go to Wood River. And so there's an out-of-area application process to be able to go to that school, and there's not going to be transportation for that. Yep.
Okay, anything else from the board on this policy? Ms. Julian.
Yeah, I'll just say that I'm I'm supportive of also exploring ways that we can more neutrally state that we are prioritizing transportation to attendance area schools only, but when circumstances allow, we'll consider other options or something like that. But again, I'm not in favor of undoing what basically is already put in here. But I think we do need some flexibility there because of statute. But thank you,
Ms. LaPlante.
I think the wording could be as simple as saying the district will not be required to provide transportation to schools outside of students' attendance area.
Yeah, I would be supportive of that.
Okay, anything else from the board? Ms. Dillard?
The next board policy is 5117, non-resident and interdistrict attendance. So for this one, we brought over our foreign exchange 1023 policy, which the AASB did not have any language on, so we kind of edited this policy to work for us. And then our 1024 through 1024.2 regarding tuition. Because I had some questions from a board member about wanting a little bit more information about foreign exchange students. As far as J1 visas or J1 foreign exchange students who would not be paying tuition, we have 26 this year, we had 24 last year, we had 6 the year before, and 15 the year before that. As far as F1, where tuition would be paid, there's one one student this year, no students the year prior, one student the year before, so very, very, very minimal for the F1 visas.
Any questions, comments from the board? All right, seeing none, I think we can keep moving.
Okay, the next one is 5118 transfers. And this, we didn't really have an exact match to this policy, but I will say that we have a lot of grading related policy and administrative regulation that speaks to teachers' responsibility for finalizing grades when a kid, or who's responsible for grading based on the time period when a student comes into the school or goes out of the school. And so a lot of that content is going to be added here for administrative regulation. But other than that, we didn't have an exact match to this policy.
Okay, I'm not seeing anything from the board. Keep going.
Okay, the next one is 5119, which is children of military families. This is a new policy to our district, and we did take it to policy committee, and it was approved by policy committee to move forward.
Mr. Doran?
On this one, I would suggest that we delete the first sentence. One, I think it's a little bit unnecessary, but more importantly, it implies that those students may not be as academically successful, and we've seen that really they are. They do have challenges. They do have different circumstances than a lot of other students, but we also have many students who move on a regular basis, and I feel a certain sense of disparagement or a lack of expectation, which I know is not reflective of our district. We expect the students, we do everything we can to help them be successful, as we do with all students. But military families do have some particular changes, and we have protocols that we follow, especially on records and things of this sort. But I just think that that first sentence could easily be deleted.
Ms. Julian?
I'd like to not delete that first sentence. However, I do believe that we could just strike to academic success. So it's the school board recognizes the challenges faced by children of military families. I believe it's really important to let military connected students and families know that we recognize the unique challenges that community uniquely faces. And I think that there's power in recognizing that in policy.
Ms. Hill?
I would support Ms. Julian's recommendation.
Ms. Carol Hubbard?
I also support removing the academic success. And then I wanted to something on the next line when we're done with this line.
Go ahead, Ms. Carol Hubbard.
Where it says military families should have all opportunities, do we need the word should? mean, why? Could we will have all opportunities available to them?
I think you could replace that with would or shall. It's just something prescriptive by the board, I think, to show support for our military children to ensure that they're having opportunities available to them. So it's prescriptive in nature, and I think that's why should is there, but open to other words for sure.
Any other comments, questions from the board on BP 5119? Okay, I'm not seeing any right now. So let's go ahead and keep rolling.
The next one is Board Policy 5121, grades, evaluation of students. And so this policy does capture about 15-ish policies between 972 through 974.3, with a lot of the content that's going to be captured in administrative regulation. For example, the policy had content speaking to grading definitions, grading criteria, modified grades, final evaluation schedule, which we felt was just more appropriate for administrative regulation.
Questions or comments from the board? Seeing none. Let's keep cruising.
Okay, the next one is 5123, promotion, acceleration, retention. Let me look at my notes. So this combined a few policies, 983 through 983.4. Made some small changes, combined elementary and middle school retention and acceleration, because in our policies they were separated. Definitely took some language from the ASB model policy that it's more of a philosophy to relying on alternatives to retention as opposed to relying on retention. And this was approved by the policy committee.
Ms. Carol Hubbard.
Sorry, I not on this one. I want to go back, if we can, to the children of military families.
We can do that.
Just as we went forward, everywhere it says shall, and I'm thinking, okay, can we change the students from military families shall have all opportunities, please? Thank you.
Good.
Thank you, Ms. Carol Hubbard. All right, back to, where were we?
512, so page 28.
Thank you. 5123. Any questions, comments from the boards? Mr. Doran?
Just a clarification under acceleration, the first paragraph, for which they are not chronologically old enough. What's our reference point in terms of chronologically old enough, or could you explain that a little bit?
So we do have grade placement language that's going to end up as administrative regulation attached to the admissions policy that speaks to how grade placement is decided. That also speaks to general admissions language too for age, but it's not defined in this policy.
So we're saying 5 for kindergarten unless they're 4 under the exemptions, or if they've already started kindergarten, they can continue. They could be 4 or 5, 6, basically for first grade.
I would have.
And then I'm trying to think in terms, and why I'm asking that is, in a case we may have had a student, I think it's covered, I just want to make sure where we're at it. I'm sorry. A student who may have been retained really makes both social, academic, developmental growth, and they really need to catch up to their peers. So I'm looking at, well, chronologically, a typical fifth grader would be, about 11, 10 or 11, then they're in that grouping. Even though they have fallen behind earlier, but they've made up, and we do an acceleration. So I'm just trying to figure out where this chronological age is really just at the beginning, because state statute have some beginning numbers, they don't have later numbers.
I mean, I would agree it is about those first grade. It's about admissions to kindergarten and potentially admissions to first grade, because then that establishes your promotion annually up through the preceding grades or the next grades. So I can see how maybe chronologically old enough that language could maybe be worked on a little bit, but it is really about when you're entering kindergarten and first grade that's going to set your promotion to each grade annually from there on out.
Okay. And does this help us? I'm thinking, and again, this is old, and I have not seen this in decades, but I know just making sure that this covers us so that if a student comes to us from another country, I'm actually thinking of a student from Mexico who, prior to my being principal, was placed in first grade because that's where their reading level was. We quickly moved her later into the appropriate grade level, which was either fourth or fifth at that time. I think I moved her into fifth. Chronologically, that's where she should have been. And so I'm looking at this, again, it's not necessarily an acceleration, but it goes in. I just want to make sure we're covered and principals are covered to make sure when they do those grade placement, you say we have more information on that, more language on that. But so I don't want to belabor the point, but it just
Yeah,
raised questions.
let us think on that a little bit more in terms of if there's better language for this policy itself. I do feel like we're covered in terms of other policies, but I think the example that you just said is happening actually more so in the last couple of years because of the homeschool component, and some students are going out. Their families feel like, well, we left at first grade. Our students should now be in fourth grade, but they really are at a first grade reading level. So can we put them in first grade? And it's like, no, we're sorry. Chronologically or where you should be at right now is fourth grade, and we'll do everything we can to differentiate instruction and provide interventions to accelerate you. But let us think a little bit more in terms of this policy itself to see if there's better language to clean up that first sentence or that first paragraph.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for the more current reference. I just didn't have that currency. But it's the same concepts.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
All right, anything else from the board on this policy? Keep it moving.
Okay.
Ms. Dillard.
The
back to
next
you.
policy is Board Policy 5124, Family Engagement. We had a similar policy under 1154 for parent involvement. ASB had two policies, actually, 5124 for parent communication and then 5124.1, family engagement. We felt that was redundant and we made it one policy. There is an administrative regulation that will go with this policy.
Questions or comments from the board? Okay, seeing none, we're being real efficient tonight. Thanks, everyone.
All right, the next one is really exciting, 5125 student records. This is a very short policy that's speaking to the law around student records, but it has got like a 15-page administrative regulation. And I have to say, I was so excited to see it because I've had lots of questions come up about student records in the past. So I'm excited to bring that AR over for guidance. But this is the policy, and our current policy on the subject is 1080 student records.
Give the board a moment. Mr. Doran.
Thank you for giving me a moment here. It might, if I can bridge a little bit, this one and 5125.1, because the 5.125.1 is where I made the notation particularly, but it does, I think, apply to 5125. And it's just a question that sometimes we've gotten requests to reference a student's name differently. And sometimes there's a change in that name. I think this is covered between the two of them, especially in that, because there'd be a court decision that might change a student's name for adoption or whatever, or just changing their name. And that's happened. So I think that's well enough covered, and I think we're covered in the question where sometimes somebody wants us to release issue a report card in their nickname versus their legal name. And I think we're covered on that. And I just wanted to make sure the way we have this written, especially where we say, they can correct, amend student records. I think we're okay on it, but I just wanted to ask.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Are you actually jumping up to the challenging student records, or you're just talking about student records and release of directory information?
The on 5125 in the third paragraph, about halfway down, they can seek to amendment of student records, which are believed to be inaccurate, misleading, or in violation of the student's privacy rights, but especially the inaccurate or misleading. And maybe this, I've got records policies crossed my mind, but we have gotten requests for people to use a different first or last name for a student. That's not their legal one. When we get actually court orders, I think that's covered in here, but that this gives us that latitude and that thing to say, well, it's not inaccurate. It's just you have a preference for going by a different name. And I know we've had those questions throughout the years. And especially it sometimes comes for report cards or certificate or, diplomas type of thing, whatever. It comes up and says, well, we want them this name, but this is their legal name.
I'll research that for you, Mr. Doran. I'm pretty sure that I have seen that, and maybe it was in the very long but exciting AR to this policy that speaks to needing like birth certificate names or legal names. So let me do some research and I'll get that information
Okay.
back to you.
Yeah, and I think it is. I'm sorry. Good.
And there is a cross, well, I don't know if there's a cross to reference, but I know in our non-discrimination administrative regulation, it also has a piece in there where it talks about preferred names at school and how it can be used at school, but it's not the official name within student records. So it kind of ties back to this. But I think Ms. Dillard can reference our existing administrative regulation. And if we feel like we need to add some more text there to ensure that it's covered within this policy as well, we'll do that. But it's certainly covered in other places within the policy manual too.
Right. Okay. And I will say that maybe I'm threading the needle. I mean, it says they can seek to amend it. It doesn't mean they get to amend it,
Yep.
based on whatever the law is. So I think we're covered, but I wanted to make sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Anything else on this one, board? Not seeing anything?
So the next one is 5125.1, which is release of directory information. And that aligns with our 1080.1 with the same title.
And I'm seeing no hands. So I think we can keep going.
Okay, the next policy is 5125.2, challenging student records. We did not have this policy. I'm just going to make sure that I'm telling you the truth. Yes, we did not have this policy, so this would be new to our district.
Mr. Doran.
Just a quick question. I'm assuming um, the process would be outlined in AR for doing any of these, particularly for amending it.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're out. Okay. And the three of these are actually pretty related, so. Okay.
Okay, I'm not seeing anything else coming from the board. Let's turn the next page.
Okay, the next one is 5126, awards for achievement. This is a couple of our policies we pulled together, I think. Yes, so we have a couple of policies, 985, which was about ceremonies, 985.5 on valedictorian, salutatorian, 95.2 academic distinctions for graduations, and then we had a policy, or we have still a policy, 1074 contests and awards and prizes. So it was a couple of different places that we pulled together into one policy here.
Mr. Doran?
Okay. Just to check, we talk about tie for valedictorians, clarification. If there's a tie for salutatorians, there potentially could be 3 speakers on that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And I think I've seen that in practice.
Mhm.
So, okay. And I know there's only the tie for valedictorian that's addressed in here. That's why I asked that question. The other one is, again, understanding is, I believe some schools, and there's been discussions about not having valedictorians, salutatorians, and some schools address it by having student speakers that are selected in some way. I mean, they have ways of doing it. This says they will have a salutatorian, a valedictorian, salutatorian, and if they want to do anything else, they can, or have any additional speakers, they can, but they would have that unless such time as the district said it can be an option, or you have too many.
Yeah, that's correct. And Ms. Dillard might have more information than I do, but this has been an ongoing conversation, I think, for the last 3 or 4 years within our school district, but certainly around the nation in terms of some districts making moves to move away from valedictorian and salutatorian. Ms. Gillum did bring it to the Regional Student Council. They were very much in favor of keeping our current policy of honoring the students. Did it make it through policy committee as well?
Yes, we discussed it at policy committee, and we also surveyed teachers. And so there were a lot of mixed feedback. I mean, there were definitely people who have a strong opinion about not thinking it's a healthy practice for students to be competitive towards the valedictorian spot. But I would say it was more like 70% were in support of keeping it as is. And like Dr. Meinert said, the regional school board 100% did not want to. That was the kids we were talking to too, though.
Mhm.
And then policy committee, we had a good discussion with all of that feedback that we got from the surveys, and there weren't any requests for any changes to this policy. It wasn't this policy specifically that we brought. We were talking about weighted grades and a couple other things, but we brought it up as a topic of conversation. Mhm.
All right. Thanks for that background work.
Anything else from the board here? All right, on to the next.
The next one is 5127, graduation ceremonies and activities. And this aligns with our policy 985, commencement ceremony, and then some language from 985.4, which speaks to grad, regalia, and attire. And then we also, just so you know, do have an administrative regulation that's called graduation regalia and attire that will be attached to this policy.
Mr. Doran.
I'm sorry, just make sure I'm current enough. The issue of students earning a certificate of attendance may also participate. We still give certificates of attendance. Okay. There was talk of, at one time they weren't, and then they were, and then they weren't, and it's gone back and forth. I just want to make sure.
Yeah,
Great.
currently we do.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see anything else from the board on this one. Back to you, Ms. Dillard.
So board policy 5128, Alaska Performance Scholarship Program, and this is a new policy to our district.
Ms. Julian.
Thank you so much. I'm looking at the note here that states that we must encourage in-state, or at least a post-secondary institution in the state. And I recognize that the desire from the state for us to do so. However, there's a couple different things, and I'm not going to wordsmith this, but I just want to make sure that this policy, when we are talking about obtaining higher education through enrollment in college or career and technical education programs, I don't want this policy just to point to college. And I know that we don't, but when I read higher education, I think of college. And so I want to make sure that that we're inclusive. And so I just ask the administration to kind of hone in on that if there's a way to make sure that students that aren't on that college path still feel included, that they could get an Alaska Performance Scholarship to go to technical education. That would be great. And then the other thing that I don't love about this is in the 1, 2, 3, the fifth line, and further believes that state school attendance helps support a skilled local workforce. Well, of course we do, but I also don't want to dissuade somebody from going to a school out of state should they want to do that. So I like this policy, but I feel like it's, and perhaps it is statute and deed that is pointing us to have to write it this way. That's my feedback.
Can I ask a follow-up question? In that first sentence, it does at the end of it say, or career and technical programs upon graduation. So do we need to strengthen that even more? I guess my question is, did you catch that was also included in that first sentence? And if you did, then we can work on strengthening it. But just wanted to point out that when we said higher education, it really just means post K-12.
Yeah, post-secondary. Yep.
Yeah, post-secondary.
Mhm.
And maybe that's a better term than higher education and more inclusive of the career and technical education programs. But certainly the Alaska Performance Scholarship allows students to take advantage of both kind of your four-year institutions, but also career and technical education opportunities as well.
Yeah, I think that the only thing that made me want to raise my hand here is because we specifically listed higher education as the catch-all, I feel like. And so addressing that and making sure that all students can see themselves in this and that we aren't elevating one group of students because they're choosing to go one direction over another. But the bottom line is that we are encouraging post-secondary education. And they can of course, take advantage of this Alaska Performance Scholarship. And if it is required that DEED wants us to state that we encourage in-state attendance, I'm fine with that. But I want to make sure that students who choose to go elsewhere also feel supported.
Yeah, I mean, I think the tie-in there is if you want to utilize the Alaska Performance Scholarship Program, you do have to enroll in state. And so given that it's specific to this policy with APS designation, I mean, I think that's why it's included, because we want to be clear for families that families do have the option to send their students out of state, but if they want to take advantage of this program, they do need to enroll in an in-state tuition, in-state program.
Okay, I have Mr. Doran and then Ms. Hewitt.
Partially, my first point is in complement to what Ms. Dillion was mentioning in that second sentence. She was suggesting deleting the last phrase. I would delete the whole sentence. The board believes that institutions, if that sentence really doesn't have much bearing on the performance scholarship and becomes unnecessary and perhaps a distractor there. So I would delete that whole sentence. And then paragraph 4, I would also delete because, again, currently they give 6 years to use it. They could change that. It doesn't matter whether they change it or not. The performance scholarship will be available. So it doesn't really add. And if they do change, because they are trying to enhance it, whatever those changes will be incorporated, and if we won't have to go back to change policy.
I'd be supportive of that. Also, a question for the board. I see higher education is also in that last sentence as well in the first paragraph. I appreciate post-secondary education as a better term there, if the board's agreeable to that change.
Seeing a few head nods. Yep, thumbs ups. Yep, we're all, looks like we're in agreement. Ms. Hewitt.
As somebody who has a trade background, I think that higher education encompasses trades as well. I think people consider themselves at having a higher education when completing some of these programs. I did make a note in here that it could be changed to obtain all higher educations through enrollment in both college or career and technical programs. That could just more inclusive language as a possibility.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
On the first sentence, the school board supports and encourages all students to obtain all higher educations through enrollment in both college or career and technical programs upon graduation. Just adding the word all in both.
Ms. Maple.
I support addressing it in that way. I think that you just pointed out a really interesting, like, internal bias of how we're defining language or thinking that language would not be inclusive, and that is itself the bias, that it is inclusive language because that is what it is considered. It is higher education. Yeah, my mind went that way as you're suggesting specific language. So I don't know that I'm saying I support whatever specific language, but the messaging that you're getting at, I certainly support. So I don't know if that made sense. I hope it did.
So my question to the board would be, do we prefer all students to obtain all higher education through enrollment in both college or career and technical programs, or to just rescind higher education and replace with post-secondary education? And the edits are on the board if you need to look at it.
So I'll speak to this too for a moment. I agree with Ms. Hewitt that the term higher education includes all sorts of things and not beyond just college. I also think that there is that might not be what the majority of the public understands higher education to be. So it's a bit of a quandary. But I do think that post-secondary education is perhaps more specific. And I would, right now, I'd be leaning towards using post-secondary education with or without the additional suggestions that Ms. Hewitt made there. Mr. Doran. And then Ms.
I can go with either higher ed or post-secondary. I think it's, I prefer the higher ed, but it doesn't matter. And I think reinforcing that it's inclusive is really important. I'm not comfortable with adding all and both because they're almost too encompassing. It says you're going to do all of this stuff, obtain all of it. Well, you may make choices within that. The both is, are we suggesting that you would enroll both in college and you would enroll in a career program? I think it just becomes confusing. And the performance scholarship really does allow the student, the awardee, to choose and to use it in any one of those areas, which I think was a great extension that the legislature did. So I just think the all and the both begins to add some confusion.
Ms. Maple, and then we'll go to Ms. Hull.
I just really think that the original sentence is very clear. The original sentence starts out the policy by saying that higher education is enrollment in college or career and technical programs. I think we're muddying something that is actually, whether it's post-secondary or higher education, I think it's, I agree with Mr. Doran that I don't care which one it is. But that the way it's written to begin with really clearly states that we are talking about both of those things.
Ms. Hull.
I was actually just going to get on to say that I support the way it's originally written, which Ms. Maple just did a great explanation, so I won't rehash that.
Okay, thank you. Anything further? Anything, board members? Okay. I anticipate that there may be more discussion about this at a future work session or first reading. But for now, it looks like we can keep moving on.
Okay, the next policy is Board Policy 5131, Student Conduct. And this policy pulls in a few of our policies related to student behavioral standards. 1042.1 is subject to school authority. 1045 is student behavioral standards. 1045.1 consequences. 1045.2 on student handbooks. And then 1045.5 on authority to investigate. So we pulled a handful of policies into one. As far as the content goes, I would not say that it changes anything procedurally. It's structured different than our policies are for sure. We added some more supportive language under subject to school authority where it says this includes conduct that disrupts the orderly operation of the school or otherwise undermines the school's ability to maintain a safe and supportive learning environment. So behavior that demonstrates a clear nexus to the school environment. This is stuff that principals do deal with pretty regularly. So we added some language to support that subject to school authority. And I think with that, I'll just turn it over to you guys.
I'll just make a note that we are on page 43 out of 83 now, so over halfway. Give yourselves a pat on the back, board. And it is 7:35 p.m., so we've got about 55 minutes left in this meeting. Ms. Julian.
Okay, thank you so much, President Burgess. I don't want you to jinx anything either. So maybe we should knock on wood or something. But with this policy in particular, I just had a question about, I know that when it comes to school conduct and discipline, I want to make sure that our educators and our teachers in the classroom are feeling supported by this policy. Are we getting good feedback on this policy in particular? Are they asking for anything that's not necessarily in here or anything that we've added? Just want to see if there's any gaps in when the rubber meets the road.
I would say no, and I guess I would add too that we did bring this one to policy committee too, and it was supported by policy committee. I think there were some questions around under teachers where it says classroom rules shall be consistent. No, that wasn't it. I'm so sorry. Where was that at? I moved it under building administrator. Under the last sentence under building administrator shall ensure teachers' classroom rules comply with school rules, school board policies, and administrative regulation, and have final oversight over classroom management plans. Previous language in our policy was stated like will be approved by the principal, and there was discussion at policy committee about what that realistically looks like at the school level. So we changed that language. But I would say everything else aligns with what we already had procedurally.
Okay, I'm not seeing anything else from the board.
The next one is 5131.1, bus conduct, short and sweet policy, which will replace our current board policy 761, bus conduct.
Looks like another easy pass.
Next policy is 5131.42, threats of violence. And so this is a new policy to our district. Let me get to my notes. Yes, we do not have a match to this policy. We do have language about student conduct that speaks to threats, threatening behavior, assaults. There's a few different behavioral violations that could fall under threatening behavior, but we felt like we did want to accept this policy from ASB model policy because it speaks to situations that don't necessarily lead to very specific discipline. The district is working on risk assessment protocols because you can have students on a very wide spectrum of threats to where it's something that's terroristic threatening, a criminal offense, and it's a very big response to students who just don't have a lot of control over what they say at a certain age. So it's the district is working on a risk assessment, and we felt that this policy was a good standalone policy to bring in.
Ms. Julian.
Yeah, I have a question about the educating our students in particular about this policy, because there are very severe consequences, understandably, and I'm supportive of that. However, I just want students to really understand that even joking in regards to this could lead to pretty severe discipline. So I'd hope that there's an administrative rollout of if we adopt this policy that students really understand this.
Yeah, absolutely. And while the policy is new, I guess the conversation at the school level is not new. This does happen on a regular basis with school administration and teachers and our counselors regularly talking with schools about the importance of choosing their language carefully and appropriately. At the high school level, the DA's office has also come into our schools and talked about how important language is and what consequences students can have if they're not using appropriate language either in person or online. And so we'll continue to do that and make students aware of the importance of using positive language within the school environment.
And I'll just add, my coworker and I, Sean Otteson, and I go around to schools and talk about some of the big behaviors that can get you in more serious trouble. And we talk about harassment, bullying, weapons violations, drug distribution. So most years we hit all the middle schools and a good portion of the high schools.
Mr. Dorn?
Just in support of this, and whether in these words, this number, this policy has been around a long time, and I just, as a practicing principal, but also recently talking to principals at different levels, this is part of the whole education process, and I think the district over the years has even stepped up, as you mentioned, some of the training you're going around and other things, but building administrators, counselors, et cetera, really working with students to be mindful of what they say. The one thing that and we may be covered in another area, whether we need some reference here, that depending on the nature of the threat, that it may be reported to law enforcement. And I know we do that a lot of times if it happens to be a bomb threat or some other types of threats of violence, whether we need to just do a quick reference that, again, depending on the nature, there may be a referral to law enforcement.
And that is in certain areas within administrative regulation and the principal's handbook in terms of what areas we should contact law enforcement in. So probably more appropriate for AR because it's procedural in nature. But as we kind of move over administrative regulations to align with this, that would be an area where, certainly if it's a bomb threat or threats of violence, we would be connecting with law enforcement on that.
Okay.
Okay, let's keep going.
Okay, the next policy is 5131.43, harassment, intimidation, and bullying. So this policy, we currently have harassment and bullying in two separate policies. So this is bringing it all together, which aligns with the state statute. The definition of harassment, intimidation, and bullying in this policy is directly from state statute. We've looked at a lot of different examples around the state, and we have a draft administrative regulation that's going to go into more definition on harassment versus intimidation versus bullying, although there's lots of crossover, and I think the consequences in a lot of ways will essentially be the same unless something like sexual harassment is coming into play. But we have done a lot of work to the administrative regulation to help guide the definitions of what this behavior looks like. It also goes over, the administrative regulation goes over cyberbullying specifically, and then appropriate reporting and response procedures.
Ms. Hewitt?
Does this cover like gang-related violence or group harassments or intimidation?
It certainly could. Yeah, it would just depend, I guess, on the scenario. But when you get into some of the definitions, especially around bullying, it talks about power dynamics, groups against individuals, and that sort of language. So I could see, yes, that fitting under here.
Oh, that's covered in AR portion of this.
Yes, it doesn't. I don't think that it speaks to gang violence or gang activity specifically. But I honestly can't remember right now. I can make a note to consider that as we're looking at it.
So I wanted to make a quick note here. In the definition, I think you just said that aligns with state statute, but I'm curious if there's room in there to add that, the first point there, number one, says physically harms the student or damages a student's property. And maybe it's covered under 2, has the effect of substantially interfering with the student's education. But I think that causing mental health issues or emotional harm should be relevant here as well. Just wanted to throw out there that I think that that should be included in the definition, regardless if the state includes it. Excuse me.
I guess my initial response to that is that number 2 definitely would cover that, having the effect of substantially interfering with the student's education. I think it gets really tricky when you start diving into mental health itself, because as we talk to our mental health support professionals, a lot of times there's not clear direction in terms of what they can give us for policy language to add into these things. And so I think, number 2 would cover that, and might be appropriate in AR if we go back to some folks in our student support services team and clinicians, if there are things that they could help us with. But I want to be careful not to necessarily call out mental health if that has kind of a different definition or legal standing that we haven't reviewed, prior to the board reviewing it.
Thank you. That's fair. I would. On a different note, I did want to remind the board too that we're in the process of working on or revising a resolution on bullying. So we might want to think about if the policy is aligning with the wording of that resolution as well. And of course, we can bring it back up at first reading or something as well. But did want to just flag that for everyone.
I might have missed that last part, but the bullying resolution will only have one reading. And so if you do have feedback, if you can get that to us relatively soon, because we are working on preparing that for the January 20th meeting to have that on there. So.
Thank you. Mr. Dorn.
In terms of the policy and the concern that Mr. Burgess, you brought up, I think 2 and 3 actually help to address that, and I am reticent about putting in mental health, especially or emotional health, whichever it might be, because that's less. It's extremely important, and I think your intent is right. But as long as we're covered with it. But it also means that, to hurt my feelings, may not be lasting, but it could be still, we don't want that prohibited or getting in the way of dealing with what might be bullying or harassment. So I'm in agreement with, but the concern really coming in under numbers 2 and 3. And I'll leave it there.
All right, thank you. Anything else from the board on this policy? Not seeing any. I think we can turn the page again.
Okay, the next one is 5131.6, alcohol and other unauthorized substances. This will replace our 1049. This will replace 1049. And actually, it's a section 1049 through 1049.4. This is almost unchanged from our current policy language. No changes to practices. We did add the opioid overdose protection, which came from the ASB model policy based on a recent change or addition to statute.
Mr. Dorn?
I'm glad that you did add the opioid in, especially since we have the overdose kits in our schools. I had a question regarding 2 and 3 under that. In some ways, they seem to be the same thing. um, that, you know, if they're on school property, the building is there. And I'm assuming that if, let's say if you were at the track or the football field or something, you're saying we want to have at least one dose out there versus, but it also seemed a little bit redundant, you know, because you still have one or two in the main building. I'm not wedded either way on it, but it was just, it seemed odd.
Yeah, do you remember why we landed on that language?
It's the exact statute language. I'm not sure about what the practices look like, though.
Okay. And I think, you know, as we've discussed activities, I think number 3 is the intent to have it more readily available during a school event than, you know, locked away in the office, so to speak. But I guess that mirrors the state statute.
Yeah, if it's in statute and that's fine. I don't have any great skin in the game on it.
Ms. LaPlante?
It may be helpful for the board to know that these rescue-saving medications have absolutely no negative effect if they're used on somebody that isn't experiencing an event. So if they were accidentally misused, they have no negative effect.
Thank you. I'll chime in here real quick, and then we'll go to Ms. Julian. I noticed that in the third point there, it says specifically on school grounds. And I'm wondering if for longer road trips, not necessarily a field trip, but the kind of, you know, athletics travel or other high school or secondary school travel where they are gone for a long time, if it would maybe make sense to add something for that as well. Ms. Julian.
My question is around protection of staff. So I know that staff that work for the school district who may have opioid overdose protection, like Narcan, in their own personal possession, and it's not necessarily a school-sponsored kit. But using that, if they come across somebody who is in need of help, I know that it doesn't negatively hurt them, but I don't want somebody who has a kit in their purse for personal, just to have that there anyway, to not use that because they need to use the school-sponsored kit. And I'm just wondering about the protection of staff in that regard.
Yeah, there's nothing in this policy that speaks to that, and district employees acting appropriately within state statute and our policies are covered. So, yeah.
Okay, anything further from the board on this policy? Ms. Julian.
One more. We talk about student use. Have we ever, or is there any precedence for including staff in this as well? Staff and employees?
In terms of administering it to staff and employees?
No, just, I mean, in regards to not using alcohol and other unauthorized substances. We talk about student use.
Oh,
For sure. We have personnel policy that
Okay.
speaks to that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more hands for this one, so let's keep rolling.
Okay, the next one is a fun one, 5131.63, performance enhancing drugs. So this policy is brand new to our district. We did not have anything, where am I? Let me get to my notes. We did not have anything, oh, did I skip something? It's because it doesn't have a heading, so I'm not seeing it on the left side. Thank you. Okay, 5131.62 is tobacco and nicotine, and this will replace our 1049.3. It does not change anything for us procedurally. And so that is page 69, 5131.62.
Page 52.
Yeah, I'm looking at page 52.
Oh, I'm in a different document. I'm sorry.
There it is.
Yes, page 52.
Mr. Dorn?
In the first paragraph, is there a reason the second half is mostly redundant to the first half? The only difference is that the second half talks about possessing paraphernalia. Is there any reason we can't include that? Including any smoking, electronic cigarette, vapor device, or paraphernalia on district property, and eliminate that second half, because that's the only difference.
Yes, I can
And,
definitely clean that
it
up
just
and
puts
make
it
it
all
more
together.
succinct. Mhm.
I think that's a great suggestion. Yep.
Anything else from the board? On to the next.
Okay, the next policy is 5131.63, performance enhancing drugs. Again, this is a new policy to our district. I will say the big thing procedurally here is in the very last paragraph where it says the superintendent or designee may ban a student from future participation as determined appropriate. That is new procedural language for us. I mean, a lot of performance enhancing drugs would already fall under some sort of drug distribution or drug use policy, but there are performance enhancing drugs that don't necessarily meet the exact parameters of being a controlled substance. So this gives the superintendent discretion to look at egregious cases of maybe distributing something like steroids or human growth hormone to be able to potentially restrict their participation in extracurricular activities, because ASA does not have defined disciplinary responses for things that are not controlled substances.
Ms. Julian?
Do we have an administrative regulation that talks about how we would test for this, or even the capacity to test if a student is on a performing performance enhancing drug?
I don't think it would be anything like that as far as testing, and there actually is a testing policy under AASB that we didn't look at. But it would be about something more egregious where you have a student who is overtly using it or potentially selling it, sharing it with other students on their team. So not about testing.
Mr. Doran?
To one point, I'm comfortable on that superintendent designee making determinations there. My question is in the first paragraph, the last sentence, what the commas are referencing. Is it that substance stimulants, et cetera, which can be lawfully purchased over the counter, or is it what the exclusions are, the dietary nutritional supplements? Those are the ones that can be. So I'm thinking that second comma after proteins would go away, because you can't get the other things just over the counter. I don't know. But can we get the steroids, et cetera, over the counter? I don't believe any of those are. I may be wrong.
I agree with taking that comma out to help that, because that, that after excluding, that is a separate category.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
separate from the other. Yeah.
Let's look at that paragraph 2 and see if we can separate that a little bit, because I do feel like it's a little bit confusing now that you've brought that to our attention, to try to clearly delineate those a little bit more.
Mhm. Yeah, maybe make 2 separate sentences. or
Yeah,
something.
exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Doran. Anything else from the board on this one? Okay, let's see how far we can get. We got 30 minutes.
Right. Okay. So the next one is 5131.7, weapons and dangerous instruments. This will replace our 1048.7. No changes to this policy, bringing it over.
Ms. Hull.
Okay, I apologize ahead of time for the wordsmithing. So in the fourth paragraph in the middle, it says develop procedures and conditions for modifying the minimum original disciplinary consequences for violations of this policy on a case-by-case basis. So with that in mind, going back to paragraph 2 and paragraph 3, I'm wondering if we could add, so it says for all students, the presumptive minimum original disciplinary consequence. And then at the end of the sentence, tag on 1 calendar year, comma, and then it would say subject to modification as provided below.
Mr. Doran and then Ms. Carol Hubbard.
Okay. I, as the administration is checking that, I don't know what the minimum for the possession of a deadly weapon, but for a firearm in schools, I believe the federal law is still the same, is a 1-year suspension. And so I would not like to see the made a presumptive at that point, because that is the law. There is provision, I think what paragraph 4 does allow is that sometimes very young age, I mean, there are some things which would be a rare exception. But even from elementary on, and having been one of the early ones under this federal law, that first one is the minimum by federal law. So I don't know whether the 30-day is ours or by, is that also federal law or state law?
State
I don't know.
law, I don't remember if that's federal law for the deadly weapon, honestly. Firearm, yes, both.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yep.
Can I ask a clarifying question to Ms. Hull?
Please proceed.
What's your intent with the term presumptive?
So it just is because there in the fourth paragraph, it says, in conditions for modifying the minimum original disciplinary consequences. So my assumption is that the school administration can modify the original disciplinary consequence. And so it's just more of one of those, I don't know, making sure that that's worded as presumptive and not tying it down if in a couple paragraphs down it says that you get to modify it.
I understand now. Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Doran.
Actually, credit to Ms. Hewitt on this one. She quickly pulled up Alaska statute. It is federal and Alaska statute, the full year and the 30 days. So
Ms. Hull.
I was just to say, if that is the statute, then can we talk about the why it says in that paragraph, the fourth paragraph, conditions for modifying the minimum original disciplinary consequences?
I don't remember where that is exactly, but there is legal guidance that states that that is under the superintendent's discretionary power to do. Our administrative regulation lays out what that looks like. It has to come in a written request from the principal, and the decision lies only with the superintendent. And it is supported by law, but I don't remember exactly where.
Ms. Hewitt?
I think it's just because it says it, administrative officer of a school district may on case-by-case basis. It's in the statute. Sorry.
Thank you. All right. Anything further from any board members here? Okay, great. Let's keep going.
Okay, the next policy is 5132, dress and grooming. This will replace it's actually in our freedom of speech and assembly policy, 1041.1, where only the administrative regulation really addresses dress code. So this is a standalone policy that would be new for us. It doesn't provide any procedural changes. And we're going to be looking at the administrative regulation again too, because that has not been updated in a while.
Mr. Doran?
Okay, in the second paragraph, second to last line, there's the phrasing, families who do not understand. It strikes me as odd in terms of what you don't understand. It's, if there are things that they cannot meet those dress or grooming requirements, or there are special circumstances, depending on how we head covering sometimes. I think our policies cover this in AR and well enough, but if there's some things within the family or for that child that would preclude meeting some aspect of those requirements, it's not. I'm not thinking of anything that don't understand. They may have a question about it. They may have a request that would go to the building administrator. I almost think, as I was looking at it more, just leaving off this last sentence, because with anything, if you have a question about it, you go to the building administrator. That's where you start. And I think that's across our things, but that phrasing, who do not understand the expectations, seems really odd to me. If we do need that idea that someone would be available to talk to is, more allowed, if they believe they can't meet the dress and grooming requirements to some extent. So my thing then would be just delete that last sentence. If not that, then at least take out that who do not understand the expectations policy. But
I'd be supportive of deleting the last sentence. I think that I would be supportive of that.
Ms. Julian?
I actually would be supportive of administration reframing this in the positive, because I don't want a student to ever feel like if they're not able to get a shower on a regular basis, let's just use that as an example, that they are going to feel like there's a disciplinary action that might be taken. And so I just want students that have those types of challenges to also feel like we are supporting them and that there's options. I also want administrators and educators to have this policy to lean on when a student is very blatantly, going beyond what is appropriate for dress code. So just kind of striking that balance a little bit more positive. And I don't want to wordsmith it, but I do support what Mr. Doran said, striking that section.
I would be happy to work on this. I think for me, it's such a touchy subject, and it's so open to interpretation. What is inappropriate or not inappropriate, and body types can change the way clothes fit on somebody. So I think that the intent of this last sentence is to ensure that we are being positive with the kids and families and supporting them understanding the goal of the policy and how it applies to their student. Um, but I could certainly, if we want to try to take this sentence at least back and work on it a little bit, I could do that.
I I would be supportive of that as well, and I'm curious if we can even highlight that there may be assistance available. I'm not even sure if there is, but maybe the administration could speak to that. How might we assist someone who is struggling to meet the dress and grooming requirements?
So, I mean, I have experience with this, certainly supporting students being able to meet those grooming requirements. Many schools have showering facilities at the school. We have washers and dryers at the schools. We work very sensitively with students and families if that's a need. So I think it could just be maybe a minor wordsmithing, like meeting with students and families who are struggling to meet the expectations of this policy and offering support or something like that. Just, I mean, I think struggling and offering support would be things that I would maybe consider adding.
That's along the lines of what I was considering as well. Mr. Doran.
Yeah, and affirming, yes, those experiences, and just being in a conversation last week where a school was really working with a student on that type of things, clothes and showering. Um, I think the big thing is right at the beginning of that sentence, schools will work with students and families. Um, and, we can go back and forth of whether ensure is the word or, to, to attain or to meet, understand and meet the dress code and grooming standards. Um, uh, because I think it is really important, and generally speaking, as Ms. Dillard said, this is sensitive and it also can be cultural. You know, in terms of interpretations, one person saying, well, torn jeans, just not appropriate, where it could be a style or, you know, and we provide clothes. We do a lot of different things. Schools do a tremendous amount, um, but I just want to highlight that schools will work with students and families, which is really what we're all talking about, and then leave more for the AAR or just the common sense that the schools are already doing in supporting kids and supporting families, whether they have running water or they don't, or they, different things. So, and how many schools put packages together for the holiday season, different events or whatever the need is for a family. House burnt down, and they rally and they do those things. So, I just want to highlight that the schools will work when they do work.
Thank you, Mr. Doran. And yes, I agree. And I do believe that it would be potentially beneficial to highlight that a little more clearly here, that supports are available. Ms. Carol Hubbard?
I just wanted to agree with that. I'd like to leave it in, and I'd like to see it, if we could wordsmith it and show support and make sure that parents, guardians, families understand that there are options. I think that's important. Thank you.
Okay, anything else from the board on this one? Ms. Hewitt?
Did this go through policy committee?
It did not.
Do they have time to go through it? Are they meeting again before we read it?
We could discuss that. I think we have policy committee on January 14th. And we do have other Article 5 policies that are actually going. Well, there's one Article 5 that's going to that committee, so.
Might be nice to get more, if that's a possibility.
Right. Yeah. So take the administration and the chair of the policy committee, Ms. Hull, will sounds like consider that for the next agenda or a subsequent one, perhaps. Thank you.
Can I ask a clarifying question on that? Is it the board's intent if for some reason it can't go through policy committee that this wouldn't come before the board in a first reading? Is there anything in this policy that's not ready to come to a first reading if it can't get to policy committee?
I wouldn't want to stop it personally. This is I wouldn't want to stop it from getting passed. It can always go back to policy committee later and we can take it up again. Mr. Doran.
I'm comfortable with it going on to, for, first reading with but I think with that, the administration moving ahead with some of the input that was received.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Doran. Yes, I concur. And anything else from the board on dress and grooming? Okay, we will move on.
Our next policy is 5133, gifts to school personnel. This is pulling in two different policies, 1072.2, which lives in our student policies, and then 577.1, which is in personnel policy. The only thing we really changed was our policy had a number to it, under $25, as opposed to, it had reasonable limits, i.e. under $25. And we felt that it was better to just keep that a little more open because of inflation.
Ms. Julian.
Okay, I just want to say that our educators do so much for our students. Okay, and I also understand bribery, receiving a bribe, unlawful gratitudes, and the definition in relation to Alaska statute. And I am not in favor of anything that violates the ethical or professional conduct of our educators. But holy cow, they do so much beyond what we pay them to do. And if somebody wants to give them a gift card for groceries over the winter break, I sure as heck hope that we can do that. Anyway, that's all I want to say. I also understand that I'm not saying that how this is worded. I would suggest changing that at all, but I just want to say that they deserve so much.
Mr. Doran.
Generally, I like this. I think it's well done. I'm glad they took the dollar amount out specifically. If it was thought to be necessary, it should go into AR rather than to policy. I do have a question in terms of adding the phrase during holidays or celebrations. That's not necessary. It could be good, although I can broaden out celebrations into any, American Education Week, Educator Appreciation, those types of things. But I just think it's just, gifts from students, provided the parent value is within reasonable limits. And I agree with Mrs. Julian in terms of they do a lot. And a lot of our parents want to show their appreciation. And I've seen them do it very, very well, 99.9% of the time. I think there's never a question about it. I would be real concerned that we don't either in AR or intimation that we suggest cash gifts. I think that is too easily misconstrued. But I think this policy is good, and I would just say that we don't have to limit it to holidays or celebrations. It can just, because I know families who have gone on vacation and they saw something, a tie that seemed to be very appropriate. I won't say who received that tie, but but you're looking at them. They just brought it back. It wasn't and they knew it was probably going to get cut. So at some point.
Ms. Hewitt.
I kind of like the holidays and or celebrations because it does set the tone of it's for something, not the right thing, I guess. But I guess that's up for debate if you wanted a tie.
Ms. Hull.
So I actually agree with Ms. Hewitt. I do like the holidays or celebrations. However, I mean, end of the school year is a great holiday. We have teacher appreciation, and there's appreciation can happen often if we need it to. But I think it's important that we do have some reasonable guidelines to protect our students and to give clear boundaries.
I'll speak that I actually I'm okay with it being struck because I can see that particularly for younger students that they might not be thinking about whether it's a holiday, just want to do something nice for their teacher. Parents might not even be involved. I just don't want to prevent students or families from just sending a small token for any reason, whether it's a holiday or celebration or not. And I think it's also, to that point, arguably, if you look at our resolutions, any month could be a celebration or of some sort. All right. We're actually going to, as long as there's nothing further on 5133, we're going to pause here for the evening. We've got about 8 minutes, and I wanted to just bring up something for the board's attention and consideration because we're getting into December. This is just a small thing when we're talking about legislative advocacy. I wanted to point out the AASB has sent out an email to us all about the legislative fly-in that occurs in February. So I wanted to make sure that's something that board members are looking at. I don't necessarily think all of us should go to the fly-in specifically, but if you wanted to go to that, it might be time to start planning. And please let me or Dr. Meinert know so that we can figure out who to send during the fly-in. But also on that note, if there are other times that you are able to make it down to Juneau to see our legislators, and advocate on behalf of the district, please talk to myself or Dr. Meinert about how you want to travel down there and whether or not you need to use our travel budget, or if you have plans to get down there on your own. And also, if I think I don't know if everyone caught this, but with the AASB School Board of the Year for 2025, that came with a free student registration to the legislative fly-in. So hopefully we can send a student. I've asked Dr. Meinert to connect with our student rep to see if he's available, and if not, we'll start looking for other potential students to send down. It's a great training opportunity as well. I went down last year with Miss Julian, and Miss Hull was there, not as a board member yet. And that also brings up another point. If there's other members of the community that you are aware that would like to go and advocate, it can be powerful to team up together and go in pairs or threes, especially if we all have varying backgrounds. So just keep that in mind. I'd really encourage everyone to try to get down to Juneau during session, which starts January 20th. All right, if there's any other questions about that or any other announcements from board members, feel free to speak up now. All right. Seeing none, we will pause here. We'll bring, we'll see what happens next. I think the administration, much like with Article 6, intends to break this up into chunks for first and second readings, which I appreciate very much. But I'll be working with Dr. Minor to see when we can get this on an agenda. And in what sections, as well as looking at everything after 5133 for future work sessions. Mr. Dorn.
And maybe just if it'd be possible to date them. I really appreciate the page numbering has been great. People really worked with that, but the dating, especially where we've had a change, can be helpful and can help me keeping track.
We can definitely do that. At the bottom, maybe we'll do like last updated or something like that. But yeah, I think that'd be a good addition.
Great. All right. Well, if there's nothing else from the board, then we are adjourned.